Pnawn da, Cynulliad Cenedlaethol Cymru I Drefn. Item 1, cwestiynau I Prif Weinidog. And question 1, Sandy Mewis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, will you provide an update on how the Welsh Government is helping to tackle fuel poverty in Delyn?
Yes, our energy efficiency programme that includes Nest and Arbed is tackling fuel poverty by improving the energy efficiency of households across Wales, including, of course, in Delyn.
Thank you. I'm really heartened to hear about the Welsh Government's work, which is going on to help people trapped in fuel poverty. But it is essential that local authorities also keep a focus on households who are suffering in this way. For example, Flintshire County Council, working with Wales and the West Utilities, have secured money for loans which will enable around 600 private households in Mostyn, in my constituency, to connect to the gas main. Based on today's prices, that will secure a saving of around £774 a year per household. The loans will be either at nominal or low interest, depending on the criteria. So, First Minister, will you join me in congratulating the authority for being proactive in this very important area?
Yes, I understand that the scheme will provide 233 council-owned properties to be connected to the gas main free of charge. It will also offer private homeowners a nominal or low-interest loan to join up. I do certainly very much welcome the scheme, and I congratulate all those involved in taking it forward.
Mark Sherwood.
Well, the Flintshire Affordable Warn Scheme, which does clearly work successfully with Flintshire Council, was the idea of the North Wales Energy Advice Centre, and they said the qualifying criteria is that the client be vulnerable in any way rather than simply based on benefit eligibility. How, therefore, do you respond to the recommendation in the 2014 UK Fuel Poverty Monitor that there's no current action plan for eradicating fuel poverty in Wales? The Welsh Government should outline how it intends to prioritise vulnerable households.
That is absolutely clear nonsense, because we know that with fuel poverty we have a number of schemes that have dealt with that, Nest and Arbed being two of them, but I do very much welcome the members' praise for Labour Council and its initiative in ensuring that fuel poverty is tackled within Flintshire.
Question 2, Lynn Eagle.
Will the First Minister make a statement on mineral extraction in the South Wales coalfield?
Well, the acceptability of minerals extraction in the coalfield should be assessed in accordance with the appropriate local development plan, with National Planning Policy on Minerals contained in Minerals Planning Policy Wales, and the MTANs, and of course any other relevant material considerations.
Thank you, First Minister. You'll understand the dismay of local residents and campaigners after it emerged that Glamorgan Power, having spent years getting rid of the previous application, now intend to submit a fresh application to Opencast at Fartig Hill. So the community there now faces another period of uncertainty. One of the most worrying aspects of the previous application was that the planning inspector seemed to pay scant regard to MTAN 2, and it was only thanks to the good sense of the Minister, Carl Sargent, that the application was overturned. First Minister, the details of this latest plan are not yet clear, but what more can you do to ensure that planning inspectors abide by the MTAN 2 guidance, which was, after all, unanimously backed by Assembly members in this chamber?
Indeed, I can say that without commenting on an individual application, the member will understand why I can't do that. The whole basis of the planning system is that it is for both local authorities and planning inspectors to take into account buffer zone policy and its application in any given case, and to accord it appropriate weight in decision making. But the MTAN is there to be observed and given appropriate weight too. I do understand, of course, that where there is a fresh application, that leads to a period of uncertainty. But the planning system, of course, enables applicants to make more than one application. That does not change the fact that with regard to the MTAN and Minerals Planning Policy Wales, that we expect the guidance contained in both those documents to be followed by inspectors.
William Graham.
Thank you, Officer. Though I appreciate, first, you cannot comment on specific applications, you will be aware of public concern both in Fartig and also in the Upper Rumney Valley about applications of this kind. Would you write to local authorities reinforcing your government's support for a 500-metre buffer zone at the very least?
There is no question that the 500-metre buffer zone is contained in the planning guidance, and that must be given, as I said, appropriate weight with any planning application regarding opencast mining particularly, but also with regard to any minerals extraction applications.
David Rees.
First Minister, opencast mining can leave many areas in a poor state following the extraction of the mineral, and basically the end of profits for that extraction company. What action is the Welsh Government taking to ensure restoration schemes for Opencast sites, which are part of the original planning application process, that they are monitored, adequately funded by the companies, and amendments made, if necessary, to ensure that funding is there so that they can be acted upon following the completion of the works at that site? Now, this will alleviate the terrible environmental scenarios we are seeing today in areas such as the Park Slip in my constituency, and which actually borders your constituency and the constituency of Ogmore.
Well, the national planning policy position is that when putting forward proposals for opencast coal working, operators and landowners should ensure that sufficient finance is set aside to enable them to meet restoration and aftercare obligations. The difficulty is, of course, that when we talk about permissions that were given in the 1990s, as a result of the privatisation of opencast coal mining, the bonds that were required to provide full restoration were not sufficient, and that was the view of the government of the day. And he will know, as I do in my role as a constituency member, that the problem that exists at Park Slip is the lack of money to pay for restoration at this stage because of what was done some 20 years ago.
We now move to questions from the leaders, and I call first this afternoon Leader Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch Llywydd. The First Minister's party leader has sought to belatedly enter the debate on the misuse of 0 hours contracts. Now, I found it particularly interesting that he cited the social care sector as an example of their inappropriate use. In the light of this, will the First Minister now commit to backing future Plaid Cymru amendments to ban the misuse of 0 hours contracts, especially in the provision of public services?
I can assure the Leader of Plaid Cymru that I do not have a party leader in the sense of being Leader of the Welsh Party any more than Elfyn Llwyd is the Leader of Plaid Cymru, because of the fact he is the spokesperson for Plaid Cymru in Westminster. She and I are on the same page in this regard, but there is no difference in terms of our viewpoint. The difficulty we had with the Social Services and Wellbeing Bill was the issue of competence. We were not prepared to risk the entire bill over an issue where it was not clear we had legislative competence. We don't believe that was the responsible way of doing it, but nevertheless, when it comes to the approach to 0 hours contracts, she and I are very much on the same page.
Llywydd, on the matter of 0 hours contracts, the First Minister is determined to divert attention to phantom legal pitfalls. He claims he is powerless to act on 0 hours contracts. I would like the First Minister to explain why he disputes your ruling, Presiding Officer, that Plaid Cymru amendments on 0 hours contracts through local authority commissioning are indeed in competence and in order.
The competence is not clear. The competence is not clear for the simple fact that it's not clear whether this would be part of social services, the field of social services, or the field of employment. Now, there is no easy answer to this, as we know, of course, because the Agricultural Sector Wages Bill has gone to the Supreme Court. We were not prepared as a government to risk this bill, the Social Services Bill, going to the Supreme Court and possibly losing the entire bill for the sake of one amendment. That said, however, if there are other ways of ensuring, as we want to move forward with this, and I'm sure she does as well, that 0 hour contracts become a thing of the past, we are, of course, prepared to do that without jeopardising a substantial piece of legislation.
The Presiding Officer may have a view on that, and our amendments were specifically in relation to local authority commissioning. Now, if there is compelling legal advice on 0 hours contracts and this Assembly's competence in relation to them, will he agree to publish that legal advice in full? But isn't it the case, though, that rather than fight for the rights of exploited workers in the Supreme Court, if need be, that the Labour First Minister of Wales would prefer to vote with the Tories against Plaid Cymru on the issue of 0 hours contracts, because that is what has happened here in this chamber on 3 separate occasions?
The Leader of Plaid Cymru will not help workers on 0 hour contracts by running headlong into a brick wall, which is something that she clearly wishes to do. She and I are in the same position with regard to 0 hour contracts. What we were not prepared to do was to take a piece of legislation that had taken up the time of this Assembly for many, many hours and jeopardise it. I do not believe that is responsible government, and I do not believe there are others on her benches who take the same view.
We now move to the Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, in your government's delivery plan for the critically ill, you say that critical care units should run at an average bed occupancy of around 65 to 70%. But last year, all units in Wales reported rates of bed occupancy greater than 80%, and many often operating beyond 100%. Could you tell the Chamber what improvement in bed occupancy rates in our critical care units have been since the delivery plan was published by your government?
Well, I can point to the fact, of course, that over the course of the winter, there was no winter crisis, as was suggested would happen. The local health boards dealt with the issues that arose over the winter. They made proper preparations, and they were in a position where they ensured that critical care beds were available in order to deal with the situation. And that, of course, is an improvement on what happened the winter before.
But, First Minister, only yesterday, the Royal College of Anaesthetists warned that a lack of critical care beds was forcing clinicians to either choose cancelling operations for patients, including cancer patients, or opting to proceed with surgery without the appropriate critical care bed. Now, you said that local health boards should have published annual reports for the critically ill by March 2014. Could you confirm to the Chamber that all local health boards have published those annual reports and are available to the public?
Well, I would expect those reports to be published by now, of course, given the date, and I would expect those reports to be made available to the public.
Thank you, First Minister. Perhaps you could check whether that is actually the case. It doesn't seem to me that the local health boards, certainly on their websites, do have those documents available for the public. First Minister, in the same delivery plan, you promised that improvements would be seen when there was better throughput through the whole hospital system. But we've seen a 19% reduction in the number of hospital beds over the last 10 years, and the BMA have warned of a bed crisis, and the most recent figures on delayed transfers of care, delayed discharges, show no improvement, and they remain stubbornly high. When will you stop reducing the number of beds in our district general hospitals, and when can we hope to see an improvement in delayed transfers of care?
This is correct to say that the number of beds has dropped over 10 years. That's been true in all parts of the UK, and there have been reasons for that. For example, people now getting treatment outside of hospitals for certain conditions which they needed hospital treatment for before. She mentions delayed transfers of care. They are, to my knowledge, at a 10-year low in Wales, whereas in England, of course, we are seeing a spike in delayed transfers of care. So yes, whilst delayed transfers of care remain for some individuals and they must be reduced, that much is true. Nevertheless, we are seeing an improvement that is historically very high as far as Wales is concerned.
And finally, Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, is it still the goal of the Welsh Government to get the PISA rankings for Wales in the top 20% by 2015?
Improvement in PISA rankings, and that's what we expect to see with the improvements that we put in place.
I'm not sure whether that was a confirmation that goal is still an aspiration central to government thinking or not, but how can people have confidence that you will be able to lift the rankings of Wales in that league table when the recent report clearly identified that there was a lack of long-term vision from the Welsh Government, implementation from Welsh Government ministers was weak, and the teachers were overwhelmed with the constant reform agenda that is at the heart of what your government is seeking to do. So how can you correlate the improvements that we all want to see in education here in Wales with that independent report highlighting the failures of your government and successive Labour governments?
Well, first of all, the report he refers to, I believe, is 7 years old. Secondly, I don't believe he's seen it, actually. He hasn't, because I know that the alleged report that was given to the BBC was only summary and conclusions, and then selectively, and not the report itself. He's perfectly welcome to see the report, of course, as are all members, but if he could confirm that he's actually seen the report and draw on which parts of the report he wishes to draw, and then, of course, I'd be more than happy to answer his questions in that regard. But I do remind him, of course, that we have seen school spending increasing in Wales. We have seen school buildings carrying on in Wales when they have been cut in England. And we have seen many of the recommendations that were even in that report being put in place by this government.
I am completely dumbfounded by that. The report The report that I referred to was your own government commissioned report by the OECD that was released just before Easter, that is in the public domain, is there for everyone to see, and was an independent appraisal commissioned by the former Education Minister into the failings of the Welsh education system. And I quote again to you, First Minister, it said, the Labour Welsh Government lacks long-term vision. The implementation of Labour ministers was weak, and teachers were overwhelmed by constant reform. And you then refer to a report that your government has sat on since 2007. We know there's been a damning indictment of failure on education delivery of your government and successive Labour governments. You are unable to give us any indication of where you want to see our rankings in 2015. Is it any wonder that there is a bunker mentality at the heart of your government and your eyes are shut in regard to education? What do you want for Welsh education? Do you want reform and improve, or do you want to carry on as you always have done?
When the Leader of the Opposition is caught out, he thinks that by speaking for a long time he can avoid the fact that he's been caught. And by shouting, of course, we know that. I mean, given what his party is doing in England with the endless weekly reforms that are being implemented there, he is on weak ground. He has not seen the report. That's what we know. Now, he has not seen that report. He is drawing from a piece of paper that he is reading from, not from the report itself. And so he is drawing from a report that he has not, in fact, himself seen. That much is a fact. He does not know what the report contains. He does not know what recommendations have been taken up by the Welsh Government. All he knows is what he has read in the media. But nevertheless, he does tell us, of course, that he is dumbfounded. Doesn't take much. Doesn't take much. We know that. We've seen it many, many times in this chamber. And I noticed today in his press conference that he said he is not a career politician. I applaud that point of view. He is not a career politician. He could go back to a business whenever he wants to. Can I say that we on these benches would like nothing more than to see him stay until at least April 2016.
Question 3, Rhina Biowydd.
Diolch Llywyddan, eith y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am bolisi Llywodraeth Cymru ar gynlluniau gwaredu daearegol yng Nghymru.
Wel, ers 2008, polisi Llywodraeth Cymru yw peidio cefnogi na gwrthwynebu gwaredu daearegol ar gyfer gwastraff ymbeledrol actifedd uwch. Ond heddi mae'r gweinidog cyfoeth naturiol a bwyd wedi lansio galwad am dystiolaeth sy'n gwahodd safbwyntiau mwyn gallu penderfynu a oes angen adolygu'r polisi ynglyn â gwaredu gwastraff o'r math hwn. Ond gael ddweud, wrth gwrs, yn hanesyddol mae'r gwastraff hyn wedi mynd i Sellafield a does dim unrhyw arodd bydd hwnna'n newid yn y dyfodol.
Diolch am y datganiad yn gynharach heddiw fel oedden ni yn ei ddeall. Mae o'n deud nad oedd gan y Llywodraeth farn o blaid nac yn erbyn gwaredu'n daearegol hyd yma. Hynny'n siom wrth gwrs i bobl yn Ynys Môn, ond go'i groesawu'r ffaith bod yna adolygiad y bosib ar y gweill. Ond gai wahodd y Prif Weinidog o ystyried y farn glir yn Ynys Môn yn erbyn claddfa o'r fath ar yr ynys i ddeud y bydd o rwan yn berffaith glir yn cefnogi ymgyrch i wrthwynebu unrhyw gladdfa o'r fath i fewnforio ymbeledredd i Ynys Môn yn y dyfodol.
Dyn ni ddim o blaid unrhyw mewnforio o wastraff mewn i Gymru. Dyn ni ddim o blaid claddu unrhyw gwastraff o'r math yng Nghymru. A ni moyn sicrhau bod y sefyllfa sydd wedi para lan i nawr yn cario ymlaen, sef bod y gwastraff eriod wedi mynd i Sellafield. Nid felly yw'n bwriad ni newid hwnna, a nid felly yw bwriad Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig o beth allwn ni weld.
Russell George.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Even though the Welsh Government has decided to reserve the powers over GDF, should a community in Wales wish to express an interest in hosting a GDF, will it still make that expression to you, which would then compel you into considering your policy position, or will it direct that interest to the UK Government?
I know not of any community in Wales that is volunteering to accept waste of this kind. The policy up until now has always been, and I hope it remains this way, that where communities wish to accept the waste in Sellafield, the communities around Sellafield have done that, that should continue to be the case.
Question 4, Lindsay Whittle.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister clarify the Welsh Government's policy towards Opencast mining locations in Wales, please?
Well, in answer to the member's question, I can refer him to previous answers I've given this afternoon, and particularly, of course, with regard to Minerals Planning Policy Wales and MTAN 2.
Thank you, First Minister. If the Nantllesc open-cast mining operation in the Rhymney Valley goes ahead, and I oppose it, a number of companies in the area have already said they will relocate. And we know that jobs are needed in the heads of the valleys area, but do you think it's right to put the promise of relatively few and short-term open-cast mining jobs above the enormous environmental costs that would be the result of open-cast mining? Nantllesc, Farteg, Llwyd, people in these communities, we have paid the price of coal, and do you agree with me, we need protection by law?
Well, the member will understand that I cannot comment on any individual planning application, but I reiterate the fact that there exists the buffer zone within the MTAN and, of course, within Minimum Planning Policy Wales.
Andrew Marty Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, when I sat on the Petitions Committee in the last Assembly, we dealt with many petitions in relation to open-cast mining and the planning process. Your government is bringing forward a new planning bill. Has your government given any consideration to making more robust the procedures that members of the public and interested parties can contribute to the decision-making process around these applications? Because one of the big things that I come across time and time again is the disconnect that many people feel they have with the decision-making process on such applications.
The difficulty with this is always the fact that there are always calls, and I've heard them before, that buffer zones, for example, should be put into law. The difficulty with that is, where does it end? Do you end up with no planning policy and everything contained in a bill, in which case there's no flexibility, or do you carry on with the situation where the planning system is set up by law, but planning policy and guidance is done through MTANs and through TANs, of course? That is what we have to wrestle with. Now, the difficulty with suggesting, for example, and he didn't suggest this, but it has been suggested before, that you introduce a buffer zone in law, particularly with regard to open-cast mining, is that why not do it for everything else? Why only pick on one particular area? And then, of course, it opens up the debate as to what the balance is between policy and the balance between actual law. In Scotland, for example, we know that even though there was, if I remember rightly, a buffer zone there that was wider, there were still successful planning applications for open-cast mining within the buffer zone. So it's not quite what it appears to be on occasion. But I believe that the approach we've taken historically as a government is the right one, namely to put in place a buffer zone, rather than the approach that's been taken in England by governments of different parties, where instead of having a physical buffer zone, there have been a number of criteria that have to be met. We don't think that that's the right approach, and we believe the buffer zone approach is the correct one.
William Powell.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd. First Minister, it was my privilege to accept an invitation to speak at the rally last week of the United Valleys Action Group at Ystrad Mynach with regard to the particular application that was referenced earlier by Lindsay Whittle AM. One issue that was brought up by some of the activists at that event was the alleged practice of some operators within the open-cast sector of dipping into community funds so as to actually top up their own legal war chest to actually fight challenges brought by the community that those funds are intended to compensate. If such were borne out to be true, First Minister, would you condemn such a practice? And secondly, would you undertake to strengthen the guidance around the governance of such community funds in the future so as to avoid such dangers occurring?
It's a serious point that the member raises. If he could write to me with further detail, and if he wishes to pass that detail on confidentially, I would, of course, be willing to consider the points that he's made.
Question 6, Mohammed Ashkar.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. What action will the Welsh Government take in 2014 to improve services for dementia sufferers in Wales?
I believe this is question 5, rather than 6.
I beg your pardon, question 5, but it's still Mohammed Ashkar.
Well, Together for Mental Health sets out the steps being taken to further improve dementia services. Our focus is on improving rates of diagnosis, raising awareness and increasing access to information and support, and we will continue to work to improve standards in primary care in district general hospital settings and, of course, within community services.
Thank you very much, First Minister, for the reply. A recent review by the CSSIW found that dementia services across Wales were not sustainable. They found significant gaps in planning and provision of prevention and early intervention services, while services to carer varied and were underdeveloped in some areas. What action will the Welsh Government take to address these issues and to improve services for dementia sufferers in Wales?
Well, I'd refer the member to the Dementia Friends initiative, which was launched in January by the Minister launched, it was the Alzheimer's Society's initiative. It is funded by Welsh Government. It is designed to increase wider understanding, to augment advocacy services and to roll out training for those delivering care. The aim, of course, is to bring the issue of dementia to the forefront of people's minds in communities across Wales. And that initiative, of course, is another example of our commitment to providing a dementia-friendly Wales.
Then Eagle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I was very pleased to go along to the launch of the Dementia Friends initiative along with colleagues from across the chamber, and I certainly do commend this initiative. I think the approach of trying to turn all communities into dementia-friendly communities is one that is very valuable, particularly given the fact that we know that 2/3 of people with dementia actually live in the community rather than in a care setting. Can I ask, First Minister, while welcoming the support for the initiative in terms of funding from the Welsh Government, whether you will personally commit to supporting this initiative and leading on this through the Welsh Government as we seek to turn Wales into a dementia-friendly country?
I can say, of course, to the member that Dementia Friends does have the support of government, and of course myself, in that regard. Dementia Friends, of course, it will help us to realise a more compassionate society and in turn give confidence to those with dementia and their family and carers. We know that by increasing public awareness, we can help to ensure those with dementia are treated in the least restrictive and understanding way possible. And I can also say it's for that reason that we also support the appeal that the Alzheimer's Society has made for 4,000 volunteers to come forward and participate.
Casey Williams.
First Minister, Wales has the lowest diagnosis rate for dementia in the UK at 38.8%. In other parts of the UK, there is a target for diagnosis, and a diagnosis is crucially important as it's often the key that unlocks both statutory and non-statutory services and support for the individual and their carers and families. Could you outline what specific steps the Welsh Government is taking to improve the diagnosis rate in Wales?
Yes, we're confident that the Wales Mental Health in Primary Care Network Primary Care Training module and the use of intelligent targets will help us realise real progress in 2014. There is work to be done, and that, of course, the member is correct in pointing that out. There will be a forthcoming Public Health Wales audit on the capacity and activities of memory assessment services. That will help us to identify where those improvements are needed. And those measures, together with the impact of the 2010 measure and the continued use of the Alzheimer's Society's cognitive assessment toolkit, will help us to improve performance this year. Of that, we're confident.
Rebecca Evans.
Thank you. First Minister, a chain of care homes operating across Wales plans to offer CCTV in residents' rooms to help stop abuse, neglect and theft by staff. On the one hand, it could prevent abuse, but equally I'm quite uneasy about filming intimate care procedures or filming people who are unable to give their own consent to that. What's the Welsh Government's approach, and will you provide guidance?
I do appreciate the concerns, and Care and Social Services Wales will be meeting with the care home operators next week to discuss how they plan to address the concerns that you raise. And of course the Inspectorate will want to understand what full consideration has been given to this proposal, particularly of course the difficulty of filming when somebody is receiving intimate care and the impact on their dignity. And I think that needs to be resolved fully before such an initiative is taken forward, and that meeting will be important next week.
Question 6, Elin Jones.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am y cynnydd tuag at gyrraedd targedau Llywodraeth Cymru ar gyfer y gwasanaeth iechyd.
Wel, ni'n parhau wrth gwrs i wneud cynnydd ar y ran fwyaf o dargedau'r gwasanaeth iechyd, a wy'n sylw bydd yr aelod yn croesawu buddsoddiad sydd wedi cael ei roi mewn i ysbyty Bron Glais ynglyn â'r adran newydd ar gyfyngau, yr adran newydd ynglyn â mamolaeth, ac wrth gwrs yr adran newydd ynglyn â gwasanaethau allan o oriau meddygon tili.
Prif Weinidog, mae 95% o gleifion yr Alban yn cael ei MRI sgan o fewn 6 wythnos, 98% o gleifion Lloegr, ond dim ond 56% o gleifion Cymru sy'n cael ei MRI sgan o fewn 6 wythnos, a dim ond 76% sydd yn cael yr MRI sgan hynny o fewn 12 wythnos. Nawr, dwi'n siŵr fod chi'n cytuno gyda fi fod perfformiad o'r math yma i'w gymharu yn anerbyniol i ni yma yng Nghymru. Felly, gai ofyn i chi esbonio, yn eich barn chi, sut ych chi'n meddwl fod yr Alban a Lloegr yn llwyddo i brofi o fewn 6 wythnos dros 95% o'i cleifion, a Cymru ond yn llwyddo i brofi drwy MRI 56% o'n cleifion ni?
Yn iawn, wrth gwrs, mae yna sgôp yna felly
Wel,
i
ffigurau chi, no?
wella sefyllfa, ond hefyd, wrth gwrs, mewn rai o ran eraill, nid yn well na'r Alban a Lloegr, sef Cancer, wrth gwrs, lle mae sefyllfa yng Nghymru llawer yn well na'r sefyllfa yn Lloegr. Mi'n wir i weid, wrth gwrs, yng ngôl adroddiad Nuffield bod na ddim lot fawr o wyniaeth rhwng y gwasanaethau iechyd rhwng Cymru, Lloegr, yr Alban a Gogledd Iwerddon. A mae hwnna yn dangos, hwnna'n adroddiad objectif, hwnna'n dangos beth yw'r sefyllfa felly. A siom mawr, wrth gwrs, bod aelod ddim wedi croesawu'r buddsoddiad mawr sydd wedi cael ei roi mewn i ysbyty Bron Glais.
Aled Roberts.
Diolch. Prif Weinidog, dwi eisiau symud ymlaen i sgan CT yn y Gogledd, lle mae safonydd Llywodraeth yn edrych ar rhyw 8 wythnos. Dros y pas, fe gefys i sgwrs efo Claf, ond wedi cael gofyn iddo aros am 4 wythnos ar 10 am CT scan, ond di hefyd cael yr awgrymiad bod y sgan ar gael yn breifat os ydw'n barod i dalu 350 o bunnoedd. Ydy hwn yn dderbyniol o fewn y gwasanaeth iechyd cenedlaethol?
Mae'n anodd iawn wrth gwrs i fi i roi barn ynglyn â sefyllfa unigolyn heb o wrth gwrs y manylion yn gyfan gwbl, ond mae yna groeso i'r aelod i sgrifennu ato fi gyda'r manylion mwyn bod ni'n gallu ystyried y sefyllfa'r unigolyn.
Question 7, Keith Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog roi'r gwybodaeth diweddara am weithgarwch Llywodraeth Cymru o adfywio canol trefi.
Mae'n polisi ar gyfer adfywio canol trefi Cymru wedi ei nodi yn y fframwaith lleoedd lliwyrchus llawn a ddewid. Ni hefyd yn darparu cymorth i ardaloedd gwella busnes ac yn datblygu cronfa fenthygiadau canol trefi. Yn ystod yr hydref eleni, bydd ni'n arwain ymgyrch cefnogi'r stryd fawr ymysg camau gweithredu eraill.
Dwi'n falch i glywed y newyddion yna a siŵr geiff yr arian ei ddefnyddio yn y gymuned. Ond beth sy'n ymecso i, wrth gwrs, wrth gered trwy canol tref Llanelli, y nifer o unedau gwag sy'n yna, yn cynnwys rai uwch ben y siopau. A os modd i ddefnyddio'r arian hyn, falle, i droi'r llefydd gwag na mewn i fflatiau, fel sy'n digwydd mewn trefydd eraill yng Nghymru.
Mae yna gyfarfod prynhawn mae'n deall rhwng swyddogion o bob awdurdod lleol yn gynnwys Sir Gar, mwyn ystyried criteria y buddsoddiad hyn. Mae hwn, wrth gwrs, yn brosiect sydd wedi cael ei ddod i allan fel prosiect byddai allai dod o tu fewn y cynllun hyn, ond wrth gwrs, wy'n siŵr bydd hwn yn cael ei ystyried prynhawn yn ystod cyfarfod.
William Graham.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Last week, we all welcomed the welcome news that a £13 million investment could take place in Ebor Vale Town Centre. Such regeneration is obviously welcome to us all. Would the Minister join me in supporting the proposed Circuit of Wales racetrack, which not only regenerate Ebor Vale, but also the surrounding boroughs for years to come?
Again, the member will know I'm in some difficulty over commenting on this, given the proposals for potential proposals for re-registration of common land, but nevertheless I'm aware of the full circumstances surrounding the application.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, am wnewch chi cytuno gyda fi bod yr £100,000,000 o bunnoedd sydd newydd fynd i Plas Llanelli yn uniongyrchol Avion Europe yn dangos gwerth aelodaeth yr Undeb Ewropeaidd i ni yma yng Nghymru. Ond ymhellach yn dwe Llanelli, pen arall y dwe, beth all Llywodraeth i wneud i wella gorsaf Llanelli sydd yn edrych yn simpl ac yn tila iawn a hyn y bryd, mae rhaid fi ddweud, o gofio bod y Steddfod a fi'n dod i'r ardal.
Wel, ynglyn â'r orsaf, wrth gwrs, nid ni sy'n perchen yr orsaf, does dim cais yn fy... Does dim cais wedi dod o'n blaen ni ar hyn o bryd, beth dwi'n deall ynglyn â gwella'r orsaf, ond dwi'n deall y pwynt mae'r aelod yn neud ynglyn â Plas Llanelli, 555 o filoedd, a wrth gwrs bydd ddim wedi bod yna heb y ffaith bod ni'n aelodau o'r Undeb Ewropeaidd ac yn dangos unwaith eto beth yw gwerth ein aelodaeth ni i bobl Cymru.
Elena Parrott.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, business rates continue to be a critical issue for town centre businesses. And we know that in places like Newport, where there's been a catastrophic decline in occupancy and therefore rental values, the decision to delay the revaluation for business rates, which could have brought down their business rates quite considerably, has been met with dismay, obviously. What assessment have you made of the impact that that delay is going to have to town centre businesses in Wales? And how can we make the rating system in future more responsive to these kinds of changing circumstances? circumstances?
Well, we look forward, of course, to business rates being fully devolved. They are not yet. We know that the UK government supports their devolution, and we trust that this will happen sooner rather than later.
Question 8, Anne Jones.
Thank you. What assessment has the First Minister made of disabled access to sporting venues in Wales, please?
Well, we do work with the providers of sporting venues, and we support the provision of appropriate disability access to those venues across Wales, although, of course, ultimate responsibility for this provision rests with the owners of those venues.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, First Minister. And I do know that the governing bodies do have a responsibility, but having travelled across Wales supporting a team that you all know I support, but I will mention it, Real FC, who are now in the top 6 of the Welsh Premier League, I've been dismayed to find that disabled facilities are varied across sporting venues, and that goes the same for rugby fields as well. And often disabled people are left not to sit with the travelling fans, but to sit on their own. And when we have segregation, because there are some people who can't get on with everybody else, I don't know why, but there are, they are often then left and can be quite vulnerable. What can the government do to talk to governing bodies about how they make sure that disabled people who want to just spectate can be made safe, but also feel that they can be part of that travelling team or of that home team that they want to support?
I can say to the member that Level Playing Field, formerly the National Association of Disabled Supporters, have undertaken an audit of all Welsh Premier League stadiums on behalf of the FAW throughout this season. The FAW are awaiting the results of that audit. I know that the FAW itself encourages all domestic league clubs to undertake a review of their own procedures with regard to the level of service provided for spectators with disabilities. But I can say the Minister for Culture and Sport is soon to meet with the FAW. I will ask him to raise your concerns with them, and I'll ensure those concerns are also conveyed to the WRU.
Nick Ramsey.
Thank you, President. I should have realised that this question was a chance for Anne Jones to get a well-earned plug-in for Real FC. First Minister, you've just mentioned the Level Playing Field organisation, which has done a lot of work in this area to try and increase disabled access to sporting venues. Actually, the 2 current Premier League clubs, current Welsh clubs in the Premier League, came out very well in a recent report in terms of disabled access. But that sort of disabled access success is not mirrored lower down the league pyramid or indeed in other sporting venues. Grateful, following from your answer to Anne Jones, if you tell us what you're going to do to try spread that good practice which some football clubs in Wales are doing to other areas of sporting life in Wales.
Well, I believe I answered the member's question in the answer I gave to Anne Jones. He refers to the City Stadium in Cardiff and the Liberty Stadium. They are fairly new stadiums, so it will be expected that they should have the best facilities possible for disabled spectators. But of course, not every stadium is that new. We wait to see, of course, what the result of the audit is that's being carried out on behalf of the FAW. And I've mentioned, of course, the meeting that the Minister will be having in due course.
Lindsay Whittle.
Diolch, Llywydd. What consideration is the Welsh Government prepared to give to assisting local authorities to provide special changing room facilities for disabled people using leisure centres, please?
I think the first thing to understand is what the extent of the issue is. There are some local authorities who will have newer facilities than others. I think it's important that local authorities do have an understanding of the adequacy of the facilities, the changing facilities that they have within their own boundaries. Then, of course, it might be possible to see what might be done to assist.
Question 9, Alan Fred Jones.
Datganiad am y cynnydd yn ymdrechion Llywodraeth Cymru ddiogelu Gymraeg fel iaith gymunedol.
Wel, mae Llywodraeth Cymru yn gweithredu ystod o weithgarwch i gynyddu'r defnydd o'r Gymraeg a'i diogelu fel iaith gymunedol. Mae'n wrth gwrs cyflwyno datganiad polisi i'r cynulliad, bydd yn ymateb i brif ganfyddiadau adolygiadau diweddar yn y maes, bydd cynnig sail gweithredu dros y 2 blynedd nesaf.
Diolch yn fawr. Yn y gynhadledd fawr, wnaethoch chi alw yn Aberystwyth, un o'r prif ganfyddiadau ydy bod symudoledd yn ffactor bwysig yn niriwiad yn nifer o ardaloedd lle mae'r Gymraeg yn iaith bob dydd. O edrych ar gynlluniau'r Llywodraeth a polisi'r Llywodraeth, ni'n sylwi nad ydy tan 20 newydd ddim yn gwirionedd yn newid fawr ddim ar yr hen dan 20. Does na ddim cyfarwyddyd pellach wedi dod fel yr addawyd i ddangos sut mae honno wedi cael ei gweithredu, a does na ddim cyfeiriad at Gymraeg chwaith yn y bil drafft cynllunio arfaethedig. Beth ydy bwriad y Llywodraeth felly i ymateb i'r canfyddiad yma, i'r canlyniad yma o'r gynhadledd fawr ydych chi wedi galw chi?
Mae yna waith wrth gwrs yn ynglyn â sicrhau bod asesiad cyson ar gael i bob awdurdod lleol i'w ddefnyddio. Mae yna enghreifftiau da, lle mae hwn wedi digwydd yn barod, sef enghraifft yng Ngwynedd. Ynglyn â'r pwynt na ll'r aelod ynglyn â'r bil cynllunio, wy'n agored i unrhyw beth gallwch wneud i gryfhau sefyllfa yr iaith Gymraeg ynglyn â'r system cynllunio. Beth bydd yn rhaid ystyried yw ym mha ffordd bydde sôn am yr iaith Gymraeg yn y bil i hunan yn wneud gwaniaeth. Mae hwnna'n rhywbeth gwrs allwn ni ystyried yn y dyfodol.
Keith Davis.
Rwy'n croesawu'r gwaith sydd wedi wneud yn Sir Gard yn arweiniad llafur, wrth gwrs, gan y grŵp trawsbreidiol gweithredol ar y cyfrifiad. Mae'r cyngor llawr nawr wedi derbyn yr adroddiad, ac rwyf yn gobeithio bod chi fel y fi yn edrych ymlaen nawr i weld e'n cael ei wireddu.
Wien, achos mi'n bwysig dros ben bod Cyngor Sir Gar yn ware rôl allweddol ynglyn â sicrhau dyfodol yr iaith Gymraeg yn y Sir ac yn hapus dros ben taw'r Sir ei hunan sydd wedi symud hwn ymlaen. Fe wedwch chi, mae'n nawr wedi derbyn yr adroddiad ei hunan, ond beth sy'n bwysig dros ben, wrth gwrs bod yr adroddiad ei hunan yn cael nawr i weithredu mwyn sicrhau bod y problemau ni wedi gweld ym mhob rhan fy marn i o Sir Gar dros y degawd nesaf yn cael i lleihau ag i weld, wrth gwrs, yr iaith yn tyfu nid dim ond ynglyn â'r nifer sy'n siarad Cymraeg, ond ynglyn â defnydd yr iaith Gymraeg yn yr hen gymunedau glofaol yn enwedig.
Paul Davies.
Diolch Llywydd. Prif Weinidog, mewn ymateb i adroddiad y grŵp gorchwil a gorffen ar gymunedau sy'n siarad Cymraeg, fel Llywodraeth, ych chi'n dweud y byddwch yn styried cronfa arbennig i gefnogi cymunedau Cymraeg ochr yn ochr a addasu'r ffordd i chi'n ariannu mentre iaith. Allwch chi ddweud wrthyn ni pryd y byddwch chi fel Llywodraeth yn wneud penderfyniad terfynol ynglyn â fydd cronfa arbennig yn cael ei sefydlu?
Bydd hwnna'n rhan o'r datganiad bydd yn cael ei wneud gan fyne yn y cynulliad.
Question 10, Joyce Watson.
Diolch, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the provision of frontline advice services?
Well, a further funding of £1 million is available this year for frontline advice services that offer help with welfare benefits, debt and money management and discrimination advice. Not-for-profit advice providers, many of which have seen their budgets cut, can apply for this grant to help them continue to provide services.
I'm very pleased to hear that, and of course I do welcome the announcement of the extra £1 million fund. I did recently do some work with the Bevan Foundation to examine the effects of spending cuts and benefit changes on women and their families in the Ystrad Gynllais area. And one of the clear messages of that research was the importance of face-to-face and over-the-phone advice. And I want to ask, Minister, whether there might be any more money for free debt services next year when payday lenders will also have to pay the Financial Conduct Authority levy.
Can I assure the member that independent and not-for-profit organisations which can demonstrate they have measures in place to quality assure the advice that they provide will be able to apply for the fund? And for example, Citizens Advice Bureau, including that in Powys, who were awarded a share of the funding in 2013 to 14, will have the opportunity, along with other advice providers which have had their funding cut, to apply for the funding as long as, of course, they meet the eligibility criteria.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, access to frontline health advice services is vital in rural areas, and the latest Rural Observatory report highlights the difficulty those living in rural areas have in accessing health advice in their immediate community. This is most obvious in dentistry, where 84% of rural communities do not have access to a locally based dentist. What does your government plan to do to increase dental services in rural areas?
Well, it depends, of course, what she means by a locally based dentist. There are indeed dentists in rural areas. There was a time, of course, when it was difficult to access an NHS dentist in many parts of Wales, but that's an issue that seems to have diminished greatly over time. And services are available to people in rural areas as they are in urban areas.
Jocelyn Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, would you consider developing a bedroom tax appeal strategy to assist tenants in their plight?
I don't know what a bedroom tax appeal strategy is, but of course if the member could provide me with information on that, I'd be more than happy. I'm more than happy, of course, to condemn the bedroom tax as I've done before. If the member is suggesting that an appeal fund should be put in place, then that is something, of course, that we'd be perfectly willing to consider. But it doesn't appeal strategy. Well, anyway, I invite the member to provide further details to see what we can do in order to move forward with our shared aim of condemning the bedroom tax.
Thank you, First Minister. We now move on.